Hey guys, my name is Sergey and today I want to tell you about the school subject that I studied when I went to school in Russia. All the subjects are in this little piece of paper. This is my high school certificate, diploma, and this is the list of the subjects that I studied and the list of the grades. Just to be clear, I am a Russian citizen, born and raised, not an immigrant, so I'm talking about a Russian citizen's experience, not an exchange experience, student's experience or something like that. By the way, my experience was a little unusual because I went to school in 1992, right after the Soviet Union collapse, and we were the first generation of school students in post-Soviet schools. And the post-Soviet schools were quite different from the Soviet-era schools, especially in such subjects as literature, history, social studies, and other subjects related to social things. So this is my high school certificate. In Russia it's called unofficially the certificate of maturity, which means like when you get this piece of paper, when you graduate from school, you are a big boy or a big girl. First of all, let me tell you really quickly about the differences between schools in Russia and, well, probably schools in your country. I'm not sure. I'm gonna be talking about the difference between Russian schools and American schools. American because I am only familiar with two school systems in Russia and in the United States. I didn't go to schools in the United States, but I know people who did, and I know a little from their experience. So, sorry people from other countries, I'm not comparing Russian schools with your schools just because I don't know anything about them. But anyway, in Russia, children go to school for 11 years, usually, in most cases. I went for 10 years, but it's not because we were super smart or something, it's just because the school system was still being reformed during the 1990s. But nowadays, children go to school for 11 years. We have 11 grades, from grade 1 to grade 11. We could divide them into three stages like elementary school, middle school and high school. And the high school part would be grade 10 and grade 11. So in this diploma I have a list of subjects that I had in grades 10 and 11. Another important difference is that, as far as I know, in American schools, students get to choose the subject that they study, at least in high school. In Russia there is no such an option. We just have the list of subjects and we go with that list no matter whether you want it or not. So all students would have the same subjects. And another little difference is the grading system. Well, in American schools you get A, B, C, D, F, plus, minus. In Russian it's a little different, it's numbers, so 5 would be excellent, 4 good, 3 acceptable, 2 bad, and teachers don't use 1. There used to be 1, but they don't do that because 1 is below bad. Bad is bad enough, so there is just no need to use 1. Most of my grades are 4s, and there are a few 5s too. I don't have 3s in this certificate, which makes me quite a good student, but to be honest, I didn't deserve a lot of those grades. Some of them I got just because, you know, when I was a school student I wasn't very good at studying, to be honest, but I was writing poetry and my school was a little proud of it that I was writing poetry and I got published quite a lot, so a lot of teachers would just be not really objective when they were grading. Another reason why I got some of those 5s is that when I was a school student I played chess, and very few people in my small town could play chess, so I got a couple of those 5s and 4s just because I could play chess. So now let me tell you about the subjects. The two most important subjects are Russian and math, but in the 10th and 11th grades we don't have math, we have algebra and geometry, right? Yeah, algebra and geometry. I got 4 for algebra and 4 for geometry. I wasn't good at math at all. I didn't like math, but math is a kind of a big deal in Russian schools. It begins in the first grade and it goes throughout the whole school life. In elementary school, of course, the math is very, very basic. In middle school, it's just math. Then we get algebra. Then math divides in sort of two different subjects, algebra and geometry. I kind of like geometry because geometry was not as mathematical as algebra, right? And geometry was quite a lot about, well, sort of drawing. But anyway, I wasn't good at math when I was in school. So another very important subject is the Russian language. And by Russian, I mean just the Russian language, not Russian and literature. Literature is another subject. I didn't like Russian because it's a quite complicated subject. You need to memorize a lot. There are tons of rules, how to spell something, how to write some words, how to correct whether you are spelling it right or not. And basically the idea, the goal of this subject is to get you to write sentences, texts correctly. I wasn't good at math until I think grade 9, when I started writing poetry. You know, when you don't write anything at all, you're not interested in learning the spelling rules. And when you begin writing something, some text on your own, it becomes more interesting for you. The subject becomes more interesting. You are creating something and you are taking interest in how it works. So I wasn't a very big fan of that subject, but I just needed it for my practical application, for my practical reasons. This is why I have 4 for Russian. And the next subject is literature, my favorite subject in school. I got 5 for literature. In Russian schools, approach to study literature is historical. It means that in middle school we begin studying with ancient literature like ancient Greece and ancient Rome and so on. Then we go to Middle Ages, then we go to foreign literature of like 17th, 18th century. Of course, some very basics. We don't study a lot, we study just some very basics. And then in the grades 9, 10, 11, we are focusing more on the Russian literature in the 19th and 20th centuries. The difference between the Soviet literature program and post-Soviet literature program was of course really huge, because a lot of writers were banned during the Soviet era, you couldn't find their books, and then all of a sudden they become subjects to study. Unfortunately, I cannot say that I have read all the books that I was supposed to, but I love that subject. By the way, the biggest and probably the most important book that a school student in Russia is supposed to read for literature is of course War and Peace by Lev Tolstoy. And to tell you the truth, most Russian people have not read War and Peace, just because it's a very big book. I mean, for a teenager, for a person who is like 17, 16, it's too serious, it's too big, it's too hard to comprehend. Most students just watched the movie, and when they had exams, they just answered based on what they remembered from the movie. The following 2 subjects are history and social studies. I got 4 for history, 5 for social studies. I didn't really like history. For me it was quite dry and complicated subject at the time. I mean, I was just not very interested and motivated. Of course, now I would understand it much better, but I think I was just too young and just not interested in the subject. As for the social studies, I liked that subject. It was quite fun. It was about how the society works and about political systems and so on. It was quite new in Russian schools. During the Soviet era, there was just one dominating social study, and other social studies were not studied. Then we've got a few science subjects: biology, physics, chemistry, and geography is probably a science subject too. So as far as I know, in many countries there is just a subject science, at least in middle school. I'm not sure about high school. We always had different subjects for chemistry, physics, and biology, and geography is probably a science. I wasn't interested in any of them, to be honest. And probably the most boring one for me was physics and chemistry and biology and geography. They all were boring for me. I didn't like chemistry and physics because they were very like math, so there were a lot of numbers, formula, and so on. And I wasn't good at numbers. And the following subject is English, the English language. I got 5 for English, but not because I knew English very well. Actually, I was quite bad at English at the time. I didn't like English, I wasn't motivated at all to study it. Well, when I finished school, I could barely say something like, hello, my name is Sergey. This is pretty much all I could say. I didn't know how to use to be verb when I graduated. For example, I couldn't say I am here, I will be here, I was here in 3 tenses, right? I couldn't do those tenses. I didn't know how to use articles, how to use can and could, may and might, and so on. I didn't know grammar at all. I only knew quite many words, mostly because I learned them from American movies and from video games. So when I was at school, I knew how to say in English, handgun collected, let's split up, are you alright? drop your weapon, but I didn't know how to say where's the nearest post office. But anyway, I got my 5 for English just because I knew a little more vocabulary than most of the other students. So I wasn't good, I was just not very bad. I took interest in English and actually started studying English a few years later, when I was 20. But when I was at school, I didn't like English at all. And to be honest, I thought that I would never be able to speak English. Alright, what we got? Computer science. Well, computer science is an interesting subject in the 1990s in Russia when no one had computers, right? In middle school we had that subject and we just opened our textbooks, our notebooks, and we would draw some algorithms or something like that. So it wasn't about computers at all. It was more about logic rather than computers. But in grades 10 and 11 our school finally purchased a bunch of computers and they made a computer class, so we finally were able to go and use real computers, and that was very interesting for me. I finally got to do something with computers, like probably we were doing some very basic Microsoft Word and Excel operation, but even that was fascinating. Well, the next subject is quite fun. It's called, well, I think the English word would be something like health and safety classes. It's mostly about what to do, for example, if there is an earthquake, right? Or if you are hit by the lightning. No, hit by the lightning is too extreme. Well, earthquake, hurricane, flood, stuff like that. Our teacher was an ex-military officer and he knew a lot of fun stories. Probably a lot of them he just made up for us. The subject was fun because you didn't actually have to do anything, even learn anything, you just had to sit and listen to those cool stories, and that's basically it. I remember one of the stories, it's a quite common military joke, what to do, what a soldier is supposed to do in case of nuclear attack. So in case of a nuclear attack, a soldier is you're supposed to grab your rifle, put it under your belly and drop on the ground. So you fall on the ground face down with your rifle under your belly. And of course someone would raise their hand and ask, "Excuse me, sir, I have a question. Why do I need to put the rifle under my belly, right?" And the answer would be, so that the rifle doesn't melt down. The point is that in case of nuclear attack, you wouldn't be able to save yourself. But if you put your rifle under your belly, you would at least be able to save your weapon. Someone might need it later. And the next subject is, I think, physical education, PE in English, or gym class, well, sport class anyway. I wasn't athletic at all when I was at school. I couldn't run the distance that I was supposed to run and so on, but I got 5 for physical education. I think you can guess why. Because I played chess, and I was just one of, I think, 2 or 3 people in our school who could play chess well. So I went to play at the regional competitions, and those competitions, they didn't make me a good chess player, but they gave me these 5. And there is also another interesting school subject that I want to tell you about. It wasn't in high school, so it was in middle school, I think in grade 8 or 9. The subject is blueprinting. Until a few years ago, blueprinting was a subject in middle school program. It wasn't optional. Everyone had to study blueprinting. You might think that this is kind of weird because blueprinting, it sounds like a trade, sounds like something very specific. But during the Soviet era, engineering was a very popular profession, hence blueprinting. I didn't like blueprinting at all. I think it was my least favorite school subject ever. On the one hand, it was a little fun because you got to draw something. You actually needed to draw blueprints of quite simple details, quite simple objects. But on the other hand, you had to be so precise. You mess up 1 millimeter, it's not gonna work. And I'm not that kind of artist who love preciseness. And that's it about my high school certificate. If you are interested, I can tell you later about my university diploma. It has much more subjects, of course. I studied mostly Russian language and literature when I was a university student, so probably it would be interesting for you too. Just let me know about it in the comments below. I hope you liked this video, and if you do, please don't forget to hit the like button, and please don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of my videos. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. Bye!